This audio presentation of Hi Dad is brought to you by the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite, Southern Jurisdiction. Written by Herbert Ewing Duncan. Executive producers: Scottish Rite Grand Commander James D. Cole, 33rd degree. Grand Master of DeMolay John Sellars and DeMolay Grand Secretary Stephen E. Crane. Narrated and produced by Matt Bowers, 32nd degree. Consulting producer Dean Alban, 33rd degree. Hi Dad Book, copyright 1981. Audio recordings copyright 2023. All rights reserved. For information on how you can donate to support this audio serial, visit DeMolay.org. Hi Dad, a biography of Frank S. Land by Herbert Ewing Duncan, published by the International Supreme Council Order of DeMolay. Forward. This book, Hi Dad, a story about Frank S. Land and the Order of DeMolay, was written more than 2 decades ago. This is not to say that the story is out of date, however. It tells the wonderful story of Frank S. Land, a man who befriended and helped a fatherless young man, and in doing so, founded an organization that today is still making our world a better place to live. Founded in 1919, the Order of DeMolay is an organization designed to build character in young men by helping them grow and mature into competent, contributing, and caring leaders in our ever-increasing global society. In 1994, the Order of DeMolay celebrated its 75th anniversary and continues to offer young men a challenging and rewarding environment, just as it did in the early years of the organization. This book is written about Frank S. Land, his life, and his founding of the Order of DeMolay. The story of his life and of the Order of DeMolay are so closely intertwined that they are a natural fit to be told together. The text was written by Reverend Herbert E. Duncan, who is now deceased, but was a close personal friend of Frank Land. Reverend Duncan was himself a member of the Order of DeMolay as a young man, and at the time he wrote this book, knew the intimacies of the organization inside and out. His book is very factual in content, as he relied heavily on interviews with individuals who were close to Frank Land, such as his sister and Frank Land's co-workers at the offices of DeMolay's headquarters. He also utilized the historical archives of the Order of DeMolay, and of course, recounts his own personal views of Frank S. Land and of DeMolay. Herbert Duncan tells this story in an impressive way, making the reader feel as if they have a personal interest in what is happening. His gift as a storyteller made him a success in his chosen profession, and this same gift served him well when he was writing this book. Whether the reader is a DeMolay member, a past DeMolay, an interested student of history, or just someone looking for a good read, this book offers just that to those who pick it up. Frank S. Land was truly a great man, a proud American, and a person who came to be known by millions simply as Dad. Frank Land's life touched and continues to impact positively generation after generation of young people, young men looking to better themselves by emulating the lessons and examples by which he himself lived. Born into and deeply devoted to a family of simple means, he dropped out of high school in order to help with their support. From a struggling high school dropout, he would go on to become a successful restaurateur, a director of a Masonic social service agency, a graduate of the Kansas City, Missouri Art Institute, and, later in life, president of the Kansas City School Board. Yet, as the subtitle of the book implies, Dad Land's best-known achievement is his founding of the Order of DeMolay, a story worth telling, and a story well worth reading. I am honored to be able to share a few words of introduction with you about Herbert Duncan and Dad Land. For God, for country, for DeMolay. Joe R. Manning, Past Grand Master, Grand Secretary, International Supreme Council, Order of DeMolay. Preface. The following page is written by Reverend Herbert E. Duncan, one of Frank Land's boys, depicts in more than ordinary detail the life and activities of Frank Sherman Land. From his boyhood to his departing this life to a greater life beyond, it tells the story of one who interested himself even as a boy in theology, one who devoted his life to teaching boys and young men who often missed, yet always sought after, Values of Christian Living. Dad Land, a man of abundant spiritual resources, dedicated his life to teaching young men the true values of the 7 cardinal virtues of the Order of DeMolay. Dad Land, revered Mason and Shriner, was an inspiration to all whose lives he touched. His way of life exemplified true religious values and thinking. He lived his life by the principles which he taught. In fact, his life was a living eulogy. My association with him was a privilege I treasure. He was my truest friend. His passing created a tremendous void in DeMolay, Masonry, and the Shrine. Countless members of these organizations are better men for having known him. His memory is an inspiration, and his teachings will live on forever. The author of this moving portrait in words was born in Kansas City and was active in DeMolay work since the early days. Herb Duncan was master of his lodge in 1934 and studied under Dr. Burris Jenkins, a noted theologian and newspaperman, former president of Transylvania College. Herb was ordained in 1932 and served several church congregations, his last as minister of Westminster Congregational Church in Kansas City. He served as a senior Grand Chaplain of the Grand Lodge of Missouri, Grand Chaplain of the International Supreme Council of the Order of DeMolay, and Chaplain of Ararat Temple of the Shrine. During World War II, he served as chaplain of the 3rd Missouri Infantry as a major. He was also a prominent Kansas City architect and a member of the American Institute of Architects. He has written one other book for DeMolay under the title Living Today for Tomorrow, which is a collection of his talks before DeMolay conclaves and camps. Herbert Ewing Duncan passed into life's most beautiful adventure on September 15, 1972. Active to the last, his sermon for September 17th was listed on the church page of the Kansas City Star the day of his memorial service at Country Club Christian Church, attended by over 2,500 persons. The following editorial appeared in the Star on Saturday, September 16th. Whether it was architecture, religion, or the encouragement of youth, the late Herbert Ewing Duncan gave his entire capabilities to the program in the foreground of a busy life. That his talents were of a magnitude beyond the reach of many persons was something Herb Duncan never spoke about to others, and possibly was not even in his own concerns. There was no need for boasting. The record of award-winning garden apartment designing of Village Green, the first 300 homes in Leawood, and the 4 high-rise apartments on the Country Club Plaza did it for him in the field of architecture. As a minister from disciplehood with Burris Jenkins, he had swayed the lives of hundreds of men, women, and children, while remaining constant to ideals of a Christian faith for the individual and congregation, but never under domination of an overriding ecclesiastical authority. In DeMolay, Shrine, and other activities of the Masonic Lodge, Herbert E. Duncan reached beyond Kansas City to national prominence, only expanding the number of persons who were inspired to test their own abilities and to love the man who had guided them to this. Always a Kansas Citian, the Reverend Herbert E. Duncan was a gentleman of many parts with a lifetime of accomplishments. He is survived by his lovely wife, Evelyn, and a wonderful family of 3 children and 8 grandchildren. Herb Duncan's storyteller's touch is a unique gift that has made him one of the most inspirational and beloved men in DeMolay and in other phases of his private, civic, religious, and Masonic life. Dadland lives again in a new dimension through the pen of Herbert E. Duncan. George M. Saunders, past Grand Master, Grand Secretary Emeritus, International Supreme Council, Order of DeMolay. Prologue. The life story of Frank Sherman Land is the story of the Order of DeMolay. One would not be complete without the other. The life of the man and the history of the order he created became as a single entity as the passing years blend into the present with the promise of the years to come. In the formative days, when the history of the order was being made and not written, Frank Land served as the advisor of the Mother Chapter, the first DeMolay chapter in the world. He knew each member as an individual and guided each boy into the activities he felt would be helpful in his development. His own quiet personality seemed to bring out the best in every life his life touched. A young candidate kneeling before the chapter altar sensed the presence of Frank Land and somehow realized that from that time onward he had a friend who would follow his life with deep interest through the years. Each boy found it easy, the natural thing, to call him Dad, little realizing that in future years legions of men in all walks of life would so refer to him, leaders of the arts and professions, congressmen and senators, governors, and presidents of our nation. As the order grew, many stories were told of trips to institute new chapters and to initiate the new members of charter classes. The younger members listened with interest as the older members told of their trips and their adventures. The service of institution in New York City caught their special attention. It was held in the Metropolitan Grand Opera House, where thousands crowded into the large and magnificent structure that had been the setting for so many ceremonies of pageantry and beauty. As the boys told it, the installing team was exhausted after the service, for they had included in their New England tour the installation of chapters in Boston, Connecticut, New Jersey, and Washington, D.C., with President Warren G. Harding present and a guest of honor. Frank Land knew his boys. He was aware of the need for relaxation, that his boys wanted to stretch their legs and to see the city. Calling them together, he said, "Now, fellows, I know you want to see New York. This is the only time you will have. Take a good look around. Report back to the hotel by 11 o'clock, and I suggest that you do not wander into the Bowery area at this time of night." Dad Land returned to the hotel along with the advisors of the group, Frank Marshall, John Fowler, Percy Budd, Judge Cochran, and several others. At midnight, he knocked at Frank Marshall's door. "Frank," he said, "I have checked all the rooms, and there is not a single one of our boys in bed or in the hotel. Where do you think they are?" Marshall replied, "I think I know. You told them to be in by 11. They probably thought you meant give or take an hour or two. But you also told them there was an area of the city where they should not go. Where do you think they are? Where would you go if you were their age after such a warning?" "Get your hat," said Land. "Bring the others. We are going to the Bowery." For an hour they walked the streets. Not a single cherub of DeMolay was seen. Then, with the clanging of bells and the screech of a siren, a Black Maria of the New York City Police Department stopped under a streetlight. A score of young arms were thrust through the bars of the window. They were waving a greeting, and a joyful, youthful chorus shouted in unison, "Hi, Dad!" Back at the hotel, the boys explained they had sauntered about the city without realizing where they were until a policeman stopped them. The officers recognized them from pictures in the investiture carried in all the papers and called for police cars to give an escorted tour. As the only vehicles available were those used to transport prisoners to and from jail, they were put to use for a guided tour. One of the boys said, "Dad, the only way to see New York is through the bars of the windows of a paddy wagon. Try it sometime." Years later, Frank Land told of his extreme emotional letdown when he saw his boys in a patrol wagon. He had always taken pride in saying that no DeMolay had ever been in trouble with the police. But there they were in a patrol car. Then he would smile and say the most welcome words he had heard in his life were those of his boys, joyfully greeting him with, "Hi, Dad."